Welcome to Anchors Way, a podcast for boaters. My goal in this podcast is to interview and converse with industry leaders and boating experts and bring to light some tips and tricks to help boaters enjoy their time on the water. We talk about industry trends, we talk about things going on in boat building, advice for getting on the water and enjoying your day on the water. We cover gear, we cover techniques, we cover training, we cover all kinds of things with the goal again of making boating more accessible, more enjoyable, more fun, and getting more people in it. I get to see the smiles that boating puts on people's faces every day up on Lake George in upstate New York. We own a Freedom Boat Club franchise. We now own a marina to go with it. And really, the joy that boating brings people, bringing families together, creating memories, families and friends are going to be talking about for a lifetime is what boating's all about and why it's such a great activity and really why so many people do it and strive to do it. So if you're listening, I hope you're either boating or considering getting into boating and we can help you enjoy the activity more if you're already doing it. If you're just thinking about it, take a listen and get some ideas on how to get into it and how to get into it right so that you're in boating for the long haul. Welcome back to Anchors Away. It's been a little while since we posted a new episode, but we were pretty busy this summer, not only running our Freedom Boat Club on Lake George, but purchasing our own marina. So we've got a lot of exciting stuff going on with our business. And that kind of leads me to my next guest, who's Matt Putnam, a founding partner and managing director of the Leisure Property Advisors at Colliers. He specializes in the sale of marina, golf, and leisure properties throughout the United States and Canada. Prior to becoming a broker, he served as the financial analyst and marketing coordinator for the National Golf and Resort Properties Group for 2 years. Matt has held an active real estate license since 2006 and has been in the leisure properties industry since 2009. In addition to investment sales, Matt and his team focus on building advisory relationships with clients and routinely provide market research, financial analysis, and management best practices at every point through the property ownership lifecycle. Matt has served a wide range of clientele from single property owner users to $100 billion pension funds and everything in between. Matt's been part of transacting more than 40 leisure properties since 2011, has served as the National Marina Director at Marcus and Millichap and was an integral part of launching and building the Marina division there. Matt grew up in Florida on and around the water, starting boating and fishing from a young age with his grandparents. Matt's had lots of experience not only owning his own boat, but as a member of the Freedom Boat Club, and still gets out on the water and makes it a big part of his life and his family's life with his wife and his daughter. Matt and I talked about his experience growing up around the water, how he got into the position he's in now with marinas and leisure properties, some really great insight into what's going on in the marina ownership world, and most importantly for boaters, advice on how to pick a marina and what to look for when you're deciding where to keep your boat. Enjoy the episode. Matt, thanks for joining me. I'm really excited to speak with you today, and the timing really couldn't be better because we just transacted on a marina, and I now have an even bigger appreciation for the work you do with your leisure property group. These are really unique, complicated properties and transactions, and having someone that has the expertise that you do on your side is definitely a major benefit. But before we get into what you're doing at Colliers, I'd love to just find out a little more about your background and kind of where you came from and how you ended up doing what you're doing. You're in Florida now. Have you been in Florida your entire life?
I have, yeah, and thanks for having me, Matt. It's nice to be here and be able to talk about what we do and how we got started. So yes, I am in Tampa, and I've lived my whole life in Florida. Grew up in Pinellas County, which is kind of Clearwater, St. Pete. I grew up in a town called Dunedin, and that's on the water on the west coast of Florida. And went to the University of Florida, lived in the Panhandle for about a year after college, and then moved back this way, and I've been here since. My background, I grew up, like I said, with an appreciation for the water. I spent a lot of time, my grandparents lived down in Inglewood, also on the west coast of Florida. Did a lot of fishing, boating, developed an appreciation for the water early on. And my first jobs in high school when I was 16 were working in the hospitality business, golf courses to start with, cart attendant, those sorts of things. And as I went to college, got more into the hospitality space, hotel management. I worked at the Hilton, University of Florida, while I was going to school there. And my first job out of college was at Sandestin up in the Panhandle. And that was a condo hotel. So that's where my crossover into real estate started. And I moved back here after leaving Sandestin and was operations manager and assistant general manager at another condo hotel property in Treasure Island, which is near St. Pete Beach, and got my real estate license at that time. Kind of the rest is history. I transitioned out of hospitality in 2009 and I joined a different firm and got in on the ground floor of two partners that were building a golf course brokerage business. So that's where I started in commercial real estate. We sold a bunch of golf courses, close to 70, 80, 90 golf courses over the course from 2009 to 2017, really. And as a product of that, we had a lot of developer clients, a lot of amenitized communities, whether it was golf. That was obviously what we were focused on, but we had a lot of those same clients that had marina-driven real estate. And so we launched the marina division about 4 years ago at the other firm, and came over here with my partners on the marina side of the business, starting at Colliers essentially January 1st of this year. So
Now, growing up there, do you remember being on the water from, the age of 3, or was it something you took to a little later in life? Do you have a first memory on the water?
I don't have a distinctive first memory, but for as far back as I can remember, I was fishing on the dock down at my grandparents' house in Placida, Inglewood area. My grandpa had 2 boats, so we would go fishing regularly, and if we weren't on the boat, I was on the dock or on the seawall fishing there. And that same set of grandparents actually they spent 6 months of the year, wintertime down in Florida, and they also had a home up on Saginaw Bay in Pinconning, and likewise spent a lot of summertime there in the water, on the water. Really didn't start fishing in the area that I lived a whole lot until probably early high school, when some of my friends started to have access to parents' boats and things like that. So been fishing here in this area probably for the last 20 years or so. But my earliest experience on the water was a little further south down in Florida, and there, Saginaw Bay up in Michigan.
When did your grandparents decide to let you try to drive the boat?
We had a couple experiences here and there from a pretty young age, but it didn't always go well. My grandparents lived on a canal, and there was always the prospect of turning the boat around in a tight space. And I remember trying to help my grandpa do that on a couple different occasions that always generally ended in him taking the wheel and setting the boat back in the right direction. But first experience with my own boat, once I moved back here from the Panhandle, I teased my wife, we'll have been married for 10 years coming up in February. And we had dated for quite a while, sort of since college. And I bought my first boat before I bought her engagement ring. So that was the tone that I set. So she always teases me about that. But we had a Maverick flats boat that we spent a lot of time fishing here locally and trailering down to the Keys to do lobster season and fish and dive down there as well.
Did she take right to boating? Did she grow up boating, or was that something new that you got her into?
She didn't grow up boating in the capacity that I did, but she took to it from early on in our relationship. She loves being on the water. We've got a 4-year-old little girl that now has the same affinity for being on the water, whether it's fishing or just cruising out to an island and spending time in and around the water. They both love it, and our dog is the same. He loves to be on the boat as well.
With your wife and daughter involved, has that changed kind of what your day on the water looks like from fishing to maybe some other activities, or do you still do a pretty fair amount of fishing?
Probably don't fish, so backing up, we sold our boat when we were pregnant with Ivy. And the thought process there was, it was a flats boat, very low to the water gunnels, and we didn't want a toddler moving around on a boat that, really didn't offer a whole lot of protection from
falling off.
falling off and everything else. That's right. So we sold it with the thought process that we would get a bigger boat, and life got in the way. And earlier this year, we finally said, you know what, we're sick of not being on the water in the capacity that we're used to and we love doing. So we actually joined Freedom down here in our area, and we've gotten a heck of a lot of use out of it, both personally and I've actually been able to use it for business several different times as well. But our day on the water now typically consists of fishing for a couple of hours, probably boating to a restaurant to grab lunch, and then spending time on our barrier islands here on the west coast of Florida, Caladesi, Three Rooker, Anklote, etc. And so that aspect of it's changed. But I've got a friend of mine that owns a charter fishing business down here, so the more serious fishing is generally done with him. And Ivy hasn't had that experience, but my wife and her family love to do that. We do it 3 or 4 times a year as a family, and we have a good time doing that as well.
What are you guys fishing for when you do those serious trips?
When we fish with him, we go offshore, so we're typically targeting grouper and snapper, and every once in a while we'll catch a cobia or a kingfish or something else. But our seasonality down here with the laws and the way the fishery changes every year, it's kind of tough to keep up with what's open when. But we generally try to schedule our trips around when gag grouper opens for the first time in the year, when red snappers open, et cetera. So that's generally what we're targeting.
Yeah, that red snapper season is going to be about 2 days pretty soon, huh?
It's been all over the map. It was 9 or 11 when we first started. That was probably 7 or 8 years ago. And they've given a different season over the last couple of years to the for-hire charter guys. So fishing with my friend who has that business, affords a little bit of flexibility there. I think one year, it might have been last year, they started off with a 3-day season. That didn't go over very well, so they ended up opening it up on weekends through Labor Day, which gave the recreational angler down in this neck of the woods a better opportunity. And you never know what the weather's going to be like either. I mean, for us out of Clearwater, the red snapper population has grown, it seems, every year since I've been fishing for them. We used to have to run 50 or 60 miles to deeper water to even find them. And now they're in 60 feet of water, which is only about 15, 20 miles off of our coast here. But before they started thriving again and being in the shallower water, I mean, you'd have to run 50 or 60 miles. So you needed a pretty calm day with a good forecast to get out there and target them. So, certainly for the recreational angler, that presented some challenges as well.
So being out on the water is great, and we know that's why we boat, but you need a place to put boats in between trips, and that's kind of where you come in. And the marina market seems hot right now. We had 3 on our lake alone transact in 2018, which is 25% of the marinas on the lake changing hands. Are you finding it to be a hot market right now? And if so, what do you attribute that to?
Well, it sounds like I need to spend a little bit more time focusing on your market if you've got that much activity going on up there.
Well, it's funny. I mean, so many of these, they haven't changed hands in 30 years, and there's this whole generation of owners right now that have no transition plan and kids that don't want to get in the business. So it's just kind of an interesting year and there's one more still on the market, which is the oldest one that's never been sold in about 90 years. So definitely an interesting time up here, but it seems like around the country with bigger companies buying a lot of marinas and kind of growing their portfolios, the marina market in general seems to be hot.
Yeah, and I think you just pretty perfectly described a scenario that we find a lot, which is these generational assets that have been in families for 2, 3, sometimes even 4 generations. And for whatever reason, the next generation doesn't have the interest, the passion, the desire to, come in and take over the family business. So we see that a lot. And there's a couple big groups that are very well capitalized, that are dealing with the Goldman Sachs of the world and buying marinas in scale and trying to execute on a business plan there. And it's not dissimilar from what happened in the self-storage industry, started happening in the self-storage industry 25, 30 years ago, where you've got this kind of top-down consolidation. So, you've got two or three big groups out there actively acquiring marinas. And then, I think that's lending itself to, it's just like anything else. Once people, whether that's on the individual investor side or smaller groups of guys, see these big firms going after a product type, it becomes more desirable to them as well. And I think part of that is just, since the Great Recession and coming out the other side, and, we've had very low interest rates for a long period of time, very favorable investment climate for commercial real estate. And, in good markets, you're seeing apartments and self-storage facilities transact for historically low cap rates, which means the property values are high. And, so you're seeing investors look at marinas and other secondary investment classes as a way to get a better yield. And, if you're investing in commercial real estate, just like if you're playing the stock market, it's all about what percent return you can get. And I think that's led a lot of people to look at these assets. And at the end of the day, worst case scenario, in a lot of cases, you end up with waterfront property. Even if the marina business for some reason down the road isn't successful, you could do worse owning the real estate that you end up owning if you buy a marina. Now, that's not always the case. And on most inland lakes, you're leasing land from either the Army Corps or any number of government agencies. But at the end of the day, that's coastal marinas are generally fee simple real estate that attracts investors as well.
And you mentioned having portfolios up in Canada. Obviously, you're down in Florida. Give me kind of your geographic scope. Are you representing properties really all around the world?
We have the ability, and that was one of the things that attracted us to come over to Colliers. Colliers is truly a global firm. And, before we arrived here, there were two separate teams within Colliers, one in Vancouver and one in the United Kingdom, that was doing marina brokerage in some capacity. And so as capital and real estate in general becomes more global, to plug in and cover basically the entire United States, plug into a network that already had investors and databases and things like that of folks that like marinas, that just was natural for us. So, our focus, myself and my partner Dan Gravatt are here in Tampa, and then our third partner Andrew Cantor's in Atlanta. So just based on where we're located, we do focus a lot of our time kind of east of the Mississippi River, eastern seaboard up through New England. Certainly, we've got a deal listed in Rhode Island. We've got one in New York. We've got several in the Mid-Atlantic. We have several in Florida. We sold a deal earlier this year in Texas, but not limited by geography with the firm that we're at, and that's a great thing for us.
And that network kind of leads into my next question. Beyond the transaction and the listing, you guys offer a range of services. So what is it that you help marina owners with after they sign their life away on that contract?
Yeah, we do. And that, Colliers is a true full service real estate firm. And that means, we've got folks that focus solely on debt and equity. We've got a valuation team that does appraisals, project management, all the way through the gauntlet of an ownership period for a marina. And generally 95% of the people that we talk to on a regular basis aren't buying or selling. So we've really tried to position ourselves to add value through that hold period. And, whether that's helping them out with a refinance, or if they need some appraisal work done for a partnership or for a bank, we're able to help them out there and get them pointed in the right direction. So our goal is to be able to share information. And, there's really not a good centralized source of information for marina sales and marina investment. AMI puts out their surveys on an operational side, and that helps get you part of the way there. But as far as information on how these things are transacting, what debt is available out there, et cetera, we really try to help our clients gather that information and make good business decisions.
So with your finger on the pulse here, what are some other trends you're seeing in marinas? We talked a little bit about consolidation. Do you see kind of a push towards more amenities? We find that we're competing for recreational dollars against a lot of, and you represent some of these other properties too, but golf courses and tennis clubs and there are things that people kind of can spend their money on and their leisure money. And
yeah, I think that's a huge thing going on right now. I've used, having kind of grown up in the golf world and working at country clubs since age 16, I see the marina space really trying to transition to more of a country club type of atmosphere. Like you said, I mean, people don't want to just show up, get on their boat and never interact with anybody. A lot of times it's folks bringing clients to a marina, so they want that high level of service. They want their boat to be gassed up. They want ice. They want the dockhand to know their name. They really want to show their clients, a good time and certainly have that country club type of experience. And, beyond that, I think service lines as well. Storage is great. And from an investment standpoint, that's probably the most valuable revenue stream. But having other service lines like a service department gives somebody a reason to store their boat at a particular location. If you had a choice of a marina that was just storage or one that had a restaurant and a service department and everything else, more often than not, you're going to go to the one that has more to offer. And so we're seeing that trend as well. And investors oftentimes are looking at a marina and saying, what else can I do here? And how can I, much like what Freedom Boat Club does in a lot of ways, which is introduce people to boating, marina owners are looking at how they can get more potential boaters to their property, whether that's, boat rentals or paddleboard rentals or, having the right charter and tour operators as tenants. Those are all things that we're seeing grow as we move forward.
And it just kind of made me think when you're talking about, putting yourself in the boater shoes and why would they choose one marina over another. Do you have any advice for maybe a boater that's looking at where to store their boat? And maybe it is just look for the amenities, but what else should a boater be looking for in a marina when they're deciding where to keep their boat?
Well, right now on the west coast of Florida, it's, does anybody have room for me? So that's generally the first issue that boaters down here face. And along those lines, as boat builders continue to build bigger and bigger center console boats, the amount of available storage for bigger boats is extremely limited. But beyond that, I would say, you want to look at the age and condition of the facility. If you're going into a dry stack, which are much more prevalent down here in Florida and along the Gulf Coast and in the Southeast than they are on lakes, but age and condition of the forklifts. Obviously, you don't want, if you've got a nice high-end center console, you don't want an old beat-up forklift that, could scratch and ding your boat. Same thing goes for in-water, wet slip marinas, is condition of the docks. Old beat up docks can beat up your boat pretty quick if they're, rattling around on the piles and things like that. So that I would say, as a boat owner would be one of the foremost primary concerns. And then, beyond that, I think it's just how is it staffed? What is the level of service? Those things I think are pretty easy to tell walking in and kind of shopping for a spot to put your boat, if you, so to speak. You can walk in and talk to the person who's behind the desk or ask to talk to the manager. those sorts of things. And then, from there, I think it's just what comes with storing my boat here. When you pull it out of the water, are you going to, flush the engine and hose it down, or am I on my own to do that? What hours, if I'm in a dry stack, what hours are you available to put my boat in the water and take my boat out of the water? Those are really kind of the main things that I think people focus on.
How is technology changing marinas for owners and maybe for boaters? And
We're certainly starting to scratch the surface of that. Every year we go to IMBC and learn more and more about some of the software that's out there from a marina management perspective. Starting to see some groups do, more dynamic pricing within a marina, which slips are more desirable. Starting to see, kind of like that airline model where every seat has a bit of a different price. I think some marina owners are using the software that's out there and continuing to be developed to understand what it is their customers want and what that's worth to them. Essentially, if you've got a slip that has got great deep water and it's right next to the parking lot, so you don't have to haul a bunch of gear, that slip may be a little bit more desirable than one all the way down at the end of a dock or a pier. So beyond that, I think there's a lot of groups out there really using technology to push more transient business as well, and organize outings and organize float groups, et cetera, that come in and use dock space that may have been underutilized. I think that's nothing but positive as well, sort of along the lines of like an Airbnb, where you've got a residence that sits vacant for part of the time, so you can put it out for rent. And seeing a lot more technology coming online along those lines as well to really bring marinas up to more full utilization.
I usually like to end with kind of a two-part question. You could take it either direction. It's the boating advice, and either or both the best piece of boating advice you've ever received, or maybe a piece of boating advice you would give anyone starting to look into getting into boating.
I think the best piece of advice that I've ever received is just take it slow, whether it's docking or just starting out. I mean, boats don't have brakes, so trying to do anything too quickly generally works out pretty poorly, especially for folks that are on the less experienced side. And just be open to constructive criticism. I think a lot of people come out on the water and just assume, well, if somebody's willing to rent me a boat, it can't be that hard to run it. And the people that I see pick it up the quickest and become the safest boaters are the ones that are willing to continue to learn and take the advice of people that have been doing it for a long time.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Matt. I appreciate you spending some time and really some good, useful information there for boaters and businessmen alike. So thank you again, and hopefully you've got some reservations on the books and you'll be back out on the water pretty soon down there.
Yeah, just got to dodge these fronts, and we've got just as many 80-degree days in December as we do 50. So hopefully we'll be on the water again soon. Thanks for having me, Matt, and look forward to doing it again down the road sometime.
Well, I got a lot out of that one, both as a marina owner and as a boater. And from both perspectives, I think Matt really nailed what you should be looking for in a marina from a business perspective and from a recreational perspective. I think there's some really exciting things happening in the marina ownership world, a lot of amenities coming to boating, Matt directing leisure properties. It's great to keep in mind that these are leisure properties. This is a leisure activity, and this is leisure and discretionary money that boaters are spending to come use these properties and making it a great experience from the second they step on the property through the second they get back in their cars. It's very important for everyone involved in the boating industry. Until next time, happy boating, and I hope you found a marina near you that you love.